This is Admitting Diagnosis, the Journal Watch podcast for the week ending November 7th. I'm Joe Elia. On offer here is the week's essential medical news plus an interview. This week, we talk about a testosterone patch that increases sexual desire somewhat in postmenopausal women. Your reactions are welcome. Please leave a voicemail at 617-440-4374, and unless your comments are too full of vituperation, I'll use them next time out. Links for everything here are available at podcasts.jwatch.org. All right, here are the week's four main medical headlines. First, most pre-diabetic Americans are unaware of their condition. Second, even low intakes of caffeine can restrict fetal growth. Third, there's a new treatment for overactive bladder. And finally, the focus of our interview this time, a testosterone patch for postmenopausal women suffering from decreased sexual desire. Now here are some details. An estimated 25% of Americans have prediabetes, but only some 4% know that they have the condition. Among those who do know of their condition, about half take active measures to try to bring it under control. The results are from a CDC survey of about 24,000 adults published in the current edition of MMWR. Next, small amounts of caffeine taken during pregnancy, the equivalent of 2 cups of brewed coffee per day, put the fetus at increased risk for growth restriction. Women who cut down their intake during pregnancy, on the other hand, had higher mean birth weights relative to those who didn't. The study appears in BMJ. Next, overactive bladder has a new drug treatment, Vesiteridine, marketed as Toviaz. The FDA this week approved the drug, an anticholinergic agent, in 4 and 8 milligram doses for daily use. Among other contraindications, the FDA advises against using the drug in the presence of decreased gastrointestinal motility. All right. That's most of the news for this week. As I said, the final story is the subject of our interview. It's about treating decreased sexual desire in postmenopausal women. That interview is next. Here is this week's interview. The latest edition of the New England Journal of Medicine carries a Phase 3 study comprising some 800 postmenopausal women with decreased sexual desire. The study examined the effects on sexual function of a twice-weekly patch delivering testosterone at either 150 or 300 micrograms per day. Improved sexual function was measured variously as the number of satisfying sexual episodes over 1-month intervals, or increases in sexual desire, or decreases in distress over sexual health. None of the women were taking estrogen supplements. The study was placebo-controlled and conducted in part by the manufacturer of the patch. By the 6-month follow-up, women on the 300 microgram patch reported an increase of roughly 2 satisfying sexual episodes per month, in addition to increases in desire and decreases in distress. Side effects included some unwanted hair growth, as well as some additional cases of breast cancer in the testosterone recipients. We've asked Dr. Susan Davis, the first author on the study, to discuss all this with us. Dr. Davis is Professor of Women's Health at Monash University and Director of the university's Center of Clinical Research in Women's Health in Melbourne. Thank you for joining us today, Dr. Davis.
My pleasure.
How prevalent is the problem of decreased libido among, for instance, your patients?
Well, I have a select population of patients because obviously they're referred to me commonly for that being a problem. But in the general population, it's thought to range somewhere between 20 and 70%. And obviously that's a massively wide variance, and that's because we really don't have a handle on the true prevalence.
When we looked at the study in Physicians First Watch, we sent out a poll with the study, and we asked clinicians what the prevalence of sexual dysfunction was among their postmenopausal women patients. And we had the possible answers in quartiles, and it was about equally divided. Equal numbers of people said 0 to 25% of their patients had the problem. But astonishingly to me, another 25% said that 75% or more of their patients had the problem. So I guess it's all over the map.
Yeah, I guess it's all over the place, and it depends if they're asking their patients the questions, or whether their patients feel that they can ask them the question, and what kind of physician they are.
And I guess some of those conversations are difficult to have to start with a clinician, and some clinicians for their part aren't keen to have them.
Often that's the case, except I think many people would find if they opened up the possibility of the conversation, it's actually not that hard, and women are greatly relieved that they can actually talk to their doctor about this.
Why did you study women who weren't taking estrogen?
There have already been several studies conducted of postmenopausal women, both naturally and surgically menopausal, on estrogen and then randomized to testosterone or placebo. So the aim of this study was very specifically to look at the effects in women not on estrogen.
Is that because most women nowadays are not taking estrogen?
It wasn't simply because women are choosing not to take estrogen. It was truly to have an understanding whether it was necessary to take testosterone concurrently with estrogen or not. It was really to actually gain the knowledge.
In your paper, previous studies had shown that, or suggested that it might be necessary to take estrogen along with testosterone.
There's been a school of thought that without taking estrogen, testosterone won't be effective, and we were very, very much asking that question.
The effects were evident rather quickly, within weeks, and stayed at that level, at a level that you found some 6 months later. Is that right?
We start to see an effect about 8 weeks, so it's certainly not a treatment that women can start and then expect to find a change in the next 1 to 2 weeks. But once a woman experiences improvement after, say, 8-10 weeks, it's relatively static then beyond that time. It doesn't continue to improve exponentially, for example.
So the maximum effect is at about the 2-month level then?
We see about 2 months to 3 months we start to see it. Now, having said that, that's fairly artificial because we are evaluating women monthly, so we have a sort of like a 4-week, 8-week, 12-week point.
Yes.
We can't really pick up if women are improving at 6 weeks or 10 weeks.
You describe the effects as modest, about 2 additional satisfying episodes of sex per month. Have other treatments achieved higher levels of satisfaction?
No other treatment has come near to this in women. The term modest was used because it's really not the way of medical literature to really crank up language about an effect, because otherwise it gives people, both clinicians and patients, unreal expectations. And clearly some women get a much more dramatic effect than others. So by using the term modest, at least it gives some limitations on the expectations. But an extra 2 events per month is really quite I wouldn't say dramatic, it is a very meaningful increase. What
about the breast cancers? Can we talk about those for a bit? There were 4 found totally, weren't there?
There were 4 breast cancers. 2 were probably pre-existing. 1 developed or was diagnosed at 4 months. So that obviously was one that was not picked up on entrance mammography, but I don't think anyone would believe that you go on a treatment and within 4 months you get a breast cancer. That was obviously there beforehand. A second woman who was diagnosed at 7 months advised us that in fact she'd had a bloody nipple discharge prior to going into the study but had not wished to inform anyone about it. So she really should be considered as having a pre-existing breast cancer. And that leaves us with 2 others, one that was picked up at 12 months on the mammography and one after 2 years. And the latter was in a woman who had 27 years of HRT and a sister with breast cancer. So I guess if you really say, look, we probably by chance had 2 picked up that were probably pre-existing. And the fact that for every woman on placebo, there were 2 women on treatment. So there really was a 2-to-1 randomization of active to placebo. The probability, if there were going to be any, would be that you'd find them in the active group.
Yes.
And I believe that the probability is really a chance finding.
Nonetheless, you are engaged in studies, in longer-term studies about this, aren't you?
Our own group, who've got a lot of experience with testosterone, have actually done a retrospective review of 700 users, and that information will be forthcoming. And the company has testosterone patch, this patch available in Europe. It's been approved. So they're doing a very large surveillance study post-marketing. So we will have more information. And I don't discount it as a possibility, but I think that the basic rationale would not suggest that this would make a lot of sense.
And so that patch is not available in Australia or in the U.S. now, is that right?
The only countries the patch is available is in European Union member countries.
Do you work with drug companies frequently doing your research?
I don't a great deal. I've just had a particular interest in this field. I published work I did a very early testosterone study in the early 90s that threw me sort of into this area, I guess. And the problem is if you want to keep looking at the role of testosterone in women and try and understand it more, it's not something, unfortunately, that the routine funding bodies are happy to fund. And you need to be able to work with somebody who's actually got a reliable product. So we're particularly looking at the role of testosterone on cognitive function, for example, at present. And although we're funded in other ways, we still have to work with a particular company who can provide us with a safe product to use in women.
They conducted the statistical analysis, and I'm just wondering what kind of for the benefit of other researchers who may be listening, have you had to develop a series of methods of coping with that sort of fine line between commercial interest and free inquiry?
I've been really very fortunate in my relationship with Procter & Gamble because I've been involved in a number of studies. In fact, I designed this study with one of their lead people who's a named co-author.
I see.
And I have a wonderful relationship with the biostatistician. And she sends me any raw data I ask for. And I actually have a lot of the files. And I have open slather for my biostatistician to look at anything that we want. And when I say, can we look at this or can we look at that, or I'm not sure why, they'll run any analyses I ask for. And it's actually a very unique, very transparent relationship. You don't always get this with industry, but I'd have to say this has been very special.
Finally, I want to ask you how, even though these patches aren't available, at least in the United States or outside of the European Union, what might clinicians learn from these results, and how might they apply them?
I think the greatest message at the moment would be that that this is a health problem for a lot of women, and it's addressed commonly for men. Women often don't want to talk to their physician about it because there's a sort of a nihilist sort of attitude. Well, there's nothing the physician can recommend for me, and for the physician, there's nothing I can recommend for the woman. So it's sort of easier not to open to Pandora's box. But in a lot of instances, just being able to talk about it, being able to educate patients, being able to offer them referral to counsellors or sexual therapists who can offer them alternatives, even talking about basic issues like vaginal lubrication, etc., can make a difference. So I think that even just destigmatizing the whole issue is an important thing.
So even discussing the problem, putting the problem on the table in the absence of a patch, do you feel is worthwhile?
Oh, absolutely, and particularly for postmenopausal women, because there is, as you inferred, a move away from using estrogen therapy, but that doesn't mean women shouldn't be offered local vaginal estrogen to treat vaginal atrophy, which can make a huge difference. A lot of women just simply don't understand that this is not a systemic therapy. It's not going to alter their risk of any breast cancer or any other conditions, and that it's effective and safe. And so just talking about it and talking about their concerns and how it may be interfering with their relationship with their partner or husband is important.
Well, Dr. Davis, thanks so much for talking with us today from Australia.
My pleasure. Thank you.
Finally this week, a political footnote. We've just had an interesting presidential election, In a few weeks before the presidential polls opened, Physicians First Watch polled its readers on their preferences for the major candidates' health platforms, and now President-elect Barack Obama won that by a 2-to-1 margin. If you'd like to leave a comment on this week's podcast, call 617-440-4374. I'd love to have your thoughts. Links for all stories are available at podcasts.jwatch.org, where you will also find a collection of previous editions. The executive producer for Admitting Diagnosis is Adoriano. Join us next week, won't you? Thank you for listening. For the Journal Watch podcast, I'm Joe Elia.